forget. It really is a great pleasure to see everyone here and the people who will continue to arrive. For those, I'm Elizabeth Sams, by the way, of BAM, and we gave ourselves a break in January. After everybody's hard works on the midterms, we thought a break was in order, but quite obviously, as we're already discussing, there's a lot of work still to do here in Florida. So it's encouraging to see people from all over ready to dive back in. Our focus tonight is going to be the legislative session, but everybody I'm seeing on this call and half the RSVPs are also already working hard on the unitary election. And having at least marginally, not more than marginally, having won some of the redistricting fight, and with the GOP mayoral candidates ripping each other to shreds daily, it seems encouraging to hope that we can elect a mayor for Jacksonville that shares our values and some strong new city council folks. And we all have an impressive woman running for appraiser. So this current election, I know this is a group that tries to be on top of everything, but with 70 different candidates, that can be difficult. So BAM has just published, and I'll put a link in the chat in a few minutes, our 2023 city election guide, which has a lot of background on candidates. It has links to endorsements or candidate questionnaires where they exist. And we hope you'll take a look at it and also circulate it to other people who are less on top of everything than you are, because turnout is the key to this election, and we need everybody to turn out. And to do that, they need to be educated. Among the things that again, we'll put in the chat, Beaches Watch and the League of Women Voters are working to schedule mayoral forums sometime in March. Our friends at Mandarin Indivisible already have one scheduled for next week, and that's another thing we'll be putting up. So the more we can get educated and be sure people we know are educated, the more likely everyone is to actually show up and vote well. We also publicize routinely in the BAM Action Alert chances to do things like text bank, phone bank, canvas, all the various ways we're trying to get out the vote. So if you're not on that list and you're interested in being updated on what groups all across town, this is not just purely a BAM thing, but anything we know about that's going on, that too I will put in the chat box. So Carol, if you'll put up our basic starter slide. Well, you know where you are and why, and that's the guide that I'll be putting in the thing. But we are recording, and this will be posted on our YouTube channel within a day or two of the meeting. We're also going to mute everyone but our speakers shortly so that the audio is as good as we can make it. And I will ask that you put any questions you have into the chat box. We're going to have all three speakers speak and then get to Q&A. And they are giving us time out of incredibly crowded schedules, so we're going to try to use that well. Let me start with Katie Hathaway. Katie is a mom in Neptune Beach and leader of a remarkably active local chapter of Moms Demand Action. If you recognize her name or not, you will almost certainly recognize her face if you have sign waved or gone to a rally or gone to a school board meeting. She is everywhere and very busy and very effective, and we're very fortunate to have her here tonight. So turning it over to Katie Hathaway.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. You're so kind. I appreciate you. I'm Katie, and I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We are the largest grassroots movement in the country fighting for common sense safety measures that will make communities safe from gun violence. As you all know, gun violence is a uniquely American crisis, and I want to highlight that just this week we concluded National Gun Violence Survivors Week, which is February 1st through 7th, because by early February, more people are shot and killed by guns in America than are killed by guns in any other high-income country in an entire calendar year. So that kind of puts our crisis into perspective. And tragically, guns are now leading cause of death for American children. And we have to tackle this crisis from a lot of different angles. But today I want to share some of our legislation that we are following this session. So if you can go to the next slide, Carol, thank you. So if you've watched the news, I'm sure you will have seen that our Governor DeSantis has been pushing the legislature to pass what he calls constitutional carry, but we're going to call it what it is. It is permitless carry. As you can see here, Representative Renner, the Speaker of the House, announced this legislation not too long ago in a grandiose fashion with a press conference and the police behind him. So this is very real, and it's going to pass because it has the governor's backing, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President's backing. So this is terrifying. It's moving extremely quickly. So if you can go to the next slide. So as you can see here, the opinion on this varies by different law enforcement. So on the left, you can see the sheriffs in Northeast Florida are supporting this legislation, including Duval County's Chief Sheriff P.K. Waters, sorry. But then also we have those opposing it, like Sheriff Mina, who is in Orange County, Sheriff Tony, and Broward, and then the St. Petersburg Chief Holloway has also spoken in opposition of this because they think it's going to make their jobs more dangerous and our public spaces more dangerous. And I want to just highlight, by federal law, it is legal to carry a concealed handgun in public in all 50 states. But going back to the constitutional carry part of this, no federal court has held that requiring a permit to carry a loaded concealed handgun in public violates the U.S. Constitution. So as of today, 25 states, including Florida and Washington, D.C., require a person to have a permit to carry a concealed handgun in public places. And most of those states also require a background check and some form of training with the firearm. So can you go to the next slide, Carol? So it's House Bill 543. It is sponsored by Representative Brannon. He's in McClenny. And basically, it's going to repeal Florida's longstanding requirement for a concealed carry weapons license, which includes fees, a criminal background check, and a completion of firearm training. And as you know, our nation is already suffering from a gun violence crisis. Every day, 100 Americans are shot and killed, and hundreds more are wounded. And our lawmakers should be putting together things that would make our community safer, and permitless carry is going to make our public spaces way less safe. If you could go to the next slide. So recent studies show that gun violence does increase when states weaken or eliminate their permitting system. And you can also see the polling on this. Nearly 90% of Americans believe that you should have a permit to carry a concealed loaded weapon in public places. I want to also point out that our current law does not require a background check when a gun is transferred between two private individuals or when there is a private sale. So oftentimes when somebody goes and applies for this concealed permit, they do get a background check, and sometimes that's the only background check that they would get in our state. And on top of that, we don't need people in public places carrying guns that don't know how to use them. That is a threat to everyone in public spaces. And before we move on, I just want to read some statistics for y'all. Between July 2021 and June of 2022, there were 281,681 new applicants for concealed weapons in Florida, and 32,618 were denied. That's 11% of people who wanted the government's approval to carry a concealed weapon in our communities. They were flagged and denied because they didn't meet the minimal requirements to do so, meaning they aren't felons or domestic abusers or habitual drug addicts. So why are we making it easier for these people to carry firearms in our communities and make law enforcement's jobs even harder? So the next slide, if you don't mind. So House Bill 543, it had its first committee hearing this Tuesday. It was heard in the House Committee on Constitutional Rights, Rule of Law, and Government Operations. And Democrats on the committee did try to amend this bill more than a handful of times, including a measure that people would have to take out a license of insurance license, insurance policy of $100,000 in case there was an accident in public. And then other amendments that were voted down were a ban in sensitive spaces like theaters, grocery stores, churches, malls. All these were very reasonable and would have made this bill better, but they were all voted down. And so it is moving on now. This bill is moving on to the Judiciary Committee. And it's going, then after, if it passes in the Judiciary, it'll go to the floor for a House vote. So as you can see, it's moving very quickly. And if it passes on the House, all the Senate has to do, because there's no companion bill in the Senate, the Senate leadership will just move it to the Senate floor for a floor vote, and then it passes both chambers, unfortunately. And so we need to be reaching out right now to the members on the Judiciary Committee who are going to be hearing House Bill 543 as soon as maybe next week. So time is of the essence. And I know we're going to drop in the chat the link to those members in the House. If you can go on to the next slide. So what can we do? I know it's hard to hear that this is moving so quickly and it's going to pass, but we can't go down without a fight. And it's important for legislators and the people of Florida to know this bill is not going unopposed. So we need to be reaching out to everyone we know, letting them know this dangerous legislation is flying through in Tallahassee, because a lot of people aren't paying attention during legislative session. And this is going to be a threat to our communities whenever we're out in public places.
I think you're muted, Katie.
Yeah, you just got put on mute.
Thank you. I don't know how that happened. Hopefully you can hear me now. Okay, so I was just basically saying we have been going to delegation meetings across the state. Volunteers have to speak against permitless carry because we knew this was coming this session. And I spoke at the Duval delegation meeting back in the fall to let them know that we oppose this. We need to be reaching out to key legislators, like I said, and just reach out to our delegates, call them, email them. They need to hear from us as constituents that we do not want this. Letters to the editor are very effective in showing how we feel. I've had a few published, but we need more. The more, get it out there. We also have a sign-on business letter for business owners, which I will get to in just a second. We need to engage with our community partners, like you all with BAM here today. Anyone you know in our community, just more people spreading this message. The Florida PTA just put out a statement in opposition of this, and they testified on Tuesday in that hearing. Social media is a really great way to get people in your circles aware, and just share whatever you can and feel comfortable doing on your personal social media. Also, we are going to be going to Tallahassee for Advocacy Day, and everyone's invited, and I will share more about that at the end. And we also launched last-minute call to action campaigns, so stay tuned for those. And then we have a group in Tallahassee, volunteers who can make it to the Capitol on a minute's notice, because we know how things get through so quickly, and they're oftentimes very last minute. So we need to be in every room where this legislation is being discussed. You can go on to the next slide. Oh, this is just an example. This was one of my letters that was published in the Times Union, and the Tallahassee Democrat also picked it up. And then we were on First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross last week to discuss permitless carry. So any way that you can get this message out, let's do it. If you can go to the next slide, Carol. So this is that business letter that I was mentioning. The QR code on the left will take you to that link, and it's a business letter for any business owner who opposes this that wants to sign on to it, and it will they're going to be sending it to Tallahassee. And so we have around 150, I think, ish businesses who have signed on so far. So if you want to, please do so, but please also don't share that on social media right now, if that's okay. And then also, we've made it really easy for people to make phone calls to key legislators on this issue. So if you text the word Florida to 64433, it'll prompt you to text back and say call, and then you'll get a phone call, and it's automated, and somebody will walk you through some talking points, and then they will put you through to one of the key legislators that we're trying to target to oppose this bill. And super easy. You can do it as many times as you want. You can go to the next slide. So I know that permitless carry is what we are massively, massively opposing, but I want to also highlight something that we are pushing for again in this session, and that is funding for community violence intervention programs. These are the boots on the ground organizations doing the work to reduce gun violence or address its root causes. So essentially, these two bills, House Bill 403 and the Senate Bill 428, they're bipartisan bills, and it would create a grant program within the Department of Child and Family Services for these community-based organizations to apply for the grant funding. And I just got an update today. So if you're interested in this and reaching out to the committees, the House bill is currently in the Children, Families, and Seniors Subcommittee, but it is not scheduled for a hearing, but we can drop the link to those members if you would like to just nudge them and say, please bring up House Bill 403 for a hearing. And then also, I just found out that the Senate bill has been referred to the Criminal Justice Committee. And also, we can share a link to those members, and it also has not gotten a hearing, so the message would be the same. So we're going to try to keep pushing this through. We did a lot of work last session, laying the groundwork, educating legislators on what community violence intervention programs are. So we're hoping that it'll gain some traction this session. If you can go to the next slide. So I know it can be very hard discussing gun violence, and this advocacy work is not easy, but it's necessary. As you can see, more than 7,000 Floridians are shot every year. This is not normal. This is not okay. And I want to thank everyone who is using their voice or advocating for change on this issue, because it's a crisis. And if you could just go to the next slide. This is Advocacy Day. If you want to join us, that QR code will take you to an RSVP link to sign up. Everyone is welcome. We are going to Tallahassee on Thursday, March 9th. That's the first week of session. And you'll be meeting at the Capitol at 10 a.m. And like I said, everyone's welcome. There will be a charter bus leaving Jacksonville around 6 a.m. Spots will be limited, but you can also drive yourself, and more the merrier. Please join us. We'll be making appointments with our legislators. And then last slide. And lastly, I just want to drop my contact information. Please reach out to me anytime if you have questions after tonight. And then also, we do have monthly meetings, and everyone is welcome to those as well. Our next one is Wednesday, February 22nd at 6:30 at Southern Swells here in Jacks Beach. And then you can also always find events on the Moms Demand Action website under the events tab. I highly recommend attending one of our monthly all volunteers meeting. It's on Zoom once a month, and volunteers from across the state meet, and our state leadership is running that meeting. So that's a great way if you can't get to us in person. It's usually a Monday night at 8 p.m. So, and that's it. And I'll stick around for questions afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, and thanks for sticking around. I hate to hold back any questions right now, but I want to get us through our three folks, and then we'll circle back. Dr. Jennifer Cowart is another amazing local activist, one of the hundreds of doctors whose open letter to Lenny Curry urging masks and things like social distancing during COVID was a key factor in turning back the Republican convention that could have been held here. She's been an officer with the Duval Democratic Party for years, and most recently, she's become the leader of the Public School Defenders, which is a vocal Duval-based counter to the Moms for Liberty assaults on book banning and LGBTQ protections and honest history in the public schools. It's impossible for me to picture how she fits all of that in around being a mother and a doctor, and here she is, the superwoman at the heart of Public School Defenders, Jenn Cowart.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And what an honor to follow Katie and her tireless activism. So I know we just heard some news that wasn't really welcome. And unfortunately, I have some news that is not terribly welcome either, but I have many ways for all of us to take specific action. Next slide. So briefly, Public School Defenders, we formed in 2022. We're a very small coalition of concerned citizens. We currently do not have any tax structure. We're not a C3 or C4. We have no money. We're just people who really care about issues in our community. We have a vision of strong public schools with the best teachers supporting students of all abilities and needs, allies of the LGBTQ+ community and other marginalized groups, and also believe in anti-racism and equity focus. So I wanted to first visualize what we want to be for. And now we're going to tell you about a few things that we're in opposition to. Next slide. And I have three items here where I believe we can take action now. There were many other things we could be talking about right now. There have been many incursions into our rights and freedoms here in Florida very recently. I picked these three because they're top of mind right now and we can take specific action. Next slide. So also dealing with legislative session in this session, we have HB1, so signaling the importance of this bill to the governor's framework for freedom, as I heard over and over again the other day in Tallahassee. It's simply called an act relating to school choice. But this bill, I believe personally, my editorial is that this is an existential crisis for public education in the state of Florida. This would expand private school vouchers from their already currently taking over $1 billion from public schools, and it would expand them to $4 billion worth of funds out of our public schools. It would expand private school vouchers to current private school students. So people who are already paying to go to private schools would get vouchers. It would go to students who want to get a voucher to attend private school without an income cap. And it would also add a series of funds for homeschooled students. These funds in the current iteration would be redirected from public schools. So they're not being diverted from other revenue streams or the general fund. These are funds that would otherwise go to your neighborhood school, my neighborhood school. These would be going to students who wish to attend private school at approximately $8,000 per student per year. And I have many references on my slides, and the slides and my documents are available in Google Drive. So this is just a list out of where the funds would be coming from. But this is $4 billion privatizing education and taking money away from public school students like my two kids and taking them to the private institutions. Next slide. So why Public School Defenders opposes HB1? This is a direct defunding of public schools. Florida has been on a privatization kick for public education for the last several years, and the voucher programs have expanded fairly quietly every year, growing. We already underfund our public schools. We receive an F rating by organizations that rank per pupil funding. We are approximately $4,000 per pupil under the national average in Florida. This in and of itself, we might think, well, maybe the private schools are better then. However, no studies either in Florida or outside of Florida have shown any consistent benefit to these type of voucher schemes. Many of these voucher receiving schools are not accredited, and the majority are religious programs. And I have references at the bottom to cite both of these findings. Voucher students also waive their federal disability rights. So many parents who are seeking care for a student with disabilities will use one of the special voucher programs aimed to get their student into private schools. Unfortunately, if they have an individual education plan, they have to waive their rights under federal law to use this voucher and attend the private school. Unfortunately, many of these students don't actually get the help they need, and the churn in these programs is such that a majority of students come back to traditional public schools within 1 to 2 years, and they're behind when they come back. So if these schools were truly better, we might be looking at something we could deal with, but they're not. And instead, we're defunding our public schools and diverting the funds to private schools. Next slide. So contact your legislators now. This is an all hands on deck. As with permitless carry, I suspect this is likely to pass, but we should not roll over and let this pass without an enormous fight. We can try to weaken this. We can try to get folks in opposition to pass amendments. Of course, it would be better if it didn't pass at all, but we have to fight before anything will happen. So I've posted 2 different groups here who are allies in this fight, who have open letters on their website that you can send an email. And in my Google document, both of those links are there. I would suggest sending them both. One of them was sending to most legislators. One of them was sending to the first committee that the bill was coming up for. This also moving very quickly. This is changing rapidly. So I would err on the side of sending them all a letter and calling. And then the Families for Strong Public Schools website also had several Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter friendly graphics that I've illustrated on the next slide. If we can go there. And you can download these quickly and use them and share them. So the one on the left has more information. The one on the right shows a missing piece of equipment that would help our students. So that's found at that link there, Strong Florida Schools. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about book bans, because book bans are in the news right now, a matter of hot topic. I had many texts and emails today regarding some of these. There are 3 laws that were passed in Florida last session that have created an absolute environment of chaos in our public schools with respect to books. So 1557 is sometimes known as Don't Say Gay, but I do not like that term. I think it gives it too much power. Really what this did was restrict instruction on quote unquote age inappropriate topics in K-3 classes with a particular focus on LGBTQ+. However, this has been expanded dramatically by local schools to essentially become a silencing of any content or books related to LGBTQ+ characters, authors, or stories. HB 7, quote unquote stop woke, which again, I think I refuse to use that title. But just so you know which one it is, this restricts instruction based on racial understanding. This is, the one that restricts diversity, equity, inclusion, content, etc. And then 1467, I think, is the dark horse. This is the one that required all curriculum to be reviewed by a quote unquote certified media specialist. And so adding those 3 together, school districts are under tremendous pressure to review content. And then the Florida Department of Education under Manny Diaz Jr. created media training documents in January of this year, stating that libraries must be free of pornography and that violations, particularly of statute 1467, could lead to felony charges for teachers or media specialists or other school staff. And the slides that these folks were given specifically state that they should err on the side of caution. It also states they can use common sense as they review their content. However, this is very vague language in the statute and the law. This has been the scope creep has already gone from classroom instruction to now we are applying it to classroom libraries, though that was not in the original law. We are now applying this to libraries, school libraries. This was not included in the law. This has been expanded already to sex ed curriculum, as we saw earlier in Duval County, as well as online supplemental educational curriculum that now some students across the state don't have access to because their schools could not guarantee that they had reviewed the curriculum to find it, as the state calls, free of pornography. Next slide. And so there's been a number of articles in local press very recently. This is from Claire Heddles at the Jax Today newsletter. This is published via WJCT. I find this to be a very good source of news, and it comes as a newsletter daily. It's free. But this is being applied unevenly across the state, and Duval County, I think, has unfortunately led on banning of books. Essentially, they're hiding books, they're pulling them for indefinite review. They are using non-transparent processes to review these books. There's at least one media specialist whose name has made the papers recently for her finding that a book that briefly mentions that 2 men were married, finding that that had no value to be in any classroom at any age, and it was age inappropriate for students at any age in the public schools. Her name is Michelle DeBias, and she is currently holding tremendous power in our public schools with respect to content. Next slide. So actions. I do want to pause here to say that I sympathize with the district. There are district school boards across the state that have been removed by the governor under various pretexts. Superintendents have been fired, have been replaced. You may have seen what happened in the news recently with New College and how the board was taken over by the governor and then they fired their president. Similar actions have taken place across the state at the school board level. And our school board has a target on them for being a school district that did have a mask mandate. When Dr. Stotts and I went, and many of you may have come and begged, to have masks to keep our kids safe. So the district feels very insecure. Teachers feel very insecure. They are scared. They don't want to be fired and lose their license. They don't want to have a felony charge. So I do want to say, first and foremost, I sympathize with them. However, our kids are suffering and their books are being held hostage. There are great pictures and videos of libraries across Duval and St. Johns County where the books are gone. We have excellent high quality books that have been returned to publishers without any transparency, including Hank Aaron's Dream, and many others. So I need everyone here to learn who your school board member is and be in frequent communication with them. I know we may have some folks from Duval and St. John's, and this is an active issue in both counties. So whichever school board that you are living in their area, you should contact them. Don't worry if you don't have a child in the public schools, or you're not a teacher, maybe you don't feel this is your fight. Guess what? Moms for Liberty and CCDF show up to every single school board meeting. Most of them do not have kids in public school. They're either older and no longer have children in school. Some of them homeschool, and we'll say they homeschool or their kids are in charter or private school. They don't have a dog in this fight either, and yet they're there. So we need to do the same. So attend the school board meetings. So the next meetings in Duval is in March. It's at March the 7th. In St. John's, it's Tuesday, March the 14th. I've placed all this information in my one pager, and I want everyone to keep this in mind. Also contact the legislator. So there's no current bills that I'm aware of, although the situation is changing rapidly. However, these are laws that they passed that we were all assured would not impact our children's education in any way. And I believe that these lawmakers need to hear from constituents that they are harming our kids' learning. Our children cannot succeed and go on to have successful, happy adult lives if they can't read in school. It's just absurd. And so we need to tell our lawmakers at the state level what is going on. And then I would encourage everyone, if you're on any kind of social media, to follow the Florida Freedom to Read Project. They are an excellent resource and they're on all social media. Public School Defenders, we're on Facebook. Our website information is on the last slide. Also, Moms Rising has been a valuable community partner with us, have created much of our media content. We are planning statewide action during session, particularly fighting HB1. I don't have dates just yet, but I will keep everyone up to date. Next slide. I would also suggest that if you're really feeling some kind of way about this, the Department of Ed has their contact information available on the website. And Educational Commissioner Manny Diaz has continued to assure all of us that none of this is actually happening, and that districts who are banning books are lazy in their reading of the statute and laws. So if you feel the need to correct him, his email, phone, all information is there. And that is also included, I believe, in my one pager. Next slide. I do want to put one pin. I love the little libraries. I'm seeing a lot of that right now on social media. If your heart is drawn in that direction, that's wonderful. I do just want to keep us focusing on the public schools for now, however, because not all students will have access to materials outside of school. And so if we get to an emergency state where the only way that kids can get some of these books is in a little library, great, let's do it. But until then, I really want us to fight to keep the opportunities in the school. Next slide. My last bit here is a bit shorter. I do want to update you on the censorship of the play at Douglas Anderson called Indecent. The play was actually about censorship and the Holocaust, and involved two female characters who have a love story and I believe share a kiss was the most graphic content available in the play. The play author had indicated that any changes that needed to make to staging or script, they had full permission for, and the students putting on the play had parental permission to do so. However, it's unclear whether this was leadership at Douglas Anderson or leadership within the school district. Someone basically canceled the play right before they were getting ready to put on the performance. These students have been in touch with national press. They are asking for assistance in signing this change.org petition. They are partnering with the ACLU right now. They are moving forward with the replacement play so that they still have a play and they can be, receive their grades and everything for this year. So it's not clear right now whether we'll get to see Indecent at some point. But right now, what we can do to help is to sign this petition, follow the local news, and I would keep this in front of the school board members. They never gave a particular instruction as to why this play was canceled. And I think given the lack of transparency we've seen around a number of these topics, we should be pressing all these issues at the school board. This was not a state decision. This was Duval County. So there's some things we can lay directly at the feet of the governor, the Board of Ed, or the legislators. This is not one of them. This is Duval County. Next slide. So to conclude, from our key actions on HB1, I need you to get loud with your state legislators. Get your friends to call, send emails, sign petitions, post on social media. And if I can get information on an action day, I will share that with Elizabeth. For the book bans, attend the school board meetings. I cannot tell you how many of these folks come to these school board meetings from Moms for Liberty and CCDF, and they will stand up and tell the most bold-faced, outrageous untruths. I have been called some very ugly things there. My more forward-facing, more queer-presenting friends and trans friends it's hurtful for them to sit there and hear the things that are said, and yet they come to try to stand in opposition. So I would ask all of us to really start finding out when your school board meetings are and start calling and emailing those board members. On the book bans, I would also take it back to the feet of the state legislators and the Board of Ed at the state. And for the play, please sign that change.org petition and keep this at the forefront at DCPS to help those students. Next slide. I do just want to editorialize for a moment, and forgive me for putting my personal opinion in here, but it really is my belief that education in Florida is in crisis. We are looking at changes to education from kindergarten through higher ed that make it very scary to be a parent right now. Scary to think, what if my kid was going to be going to something like, to a place like New College, but down the road, but this Chris Rufo guy is basically going to model it into Hillsdale South. Defunding and censorship are going to force the best teachers and brightest students to leave. And I really think that destabilizing public education it leaves room for increased privatization, and the people who are going to gain from that privatization and line their pockets, they win no matter who gets mad and leaves the school. So if far right, very religiously conservative Christian parents leave the school to homeschool, these people win. A lot of them have relationships with the companies that provide these right-wing textbooks to the school, to homeschools. If liberal parents or parents who are concerned about firearms in schools, if they leave, they still win because the public schools are destabilized. I also want to say there is a lot of heightened language in this space right now, very ugly and uncomfortable words to hear, and they're being used to make it hard to speak up. It's hard to speak up when someone says you want porn in schools, as we were told repeatedly when we were fighting for sex ed. I have decided I am not going to deign to reply to those attacks. They're simply not true. And if I spend all my breath defending why sex ed is not porn, I'm not talking about why sex ed is needed. So that is going to be my recommendation there. But I think we can use that tool against them by calling out the things that they're doing that's bad. Book banning is a tremendously unpopular term, and yet they're banning books. And we need to call that out on all levels. We need to call out censorship. people on the left, people on the right, people who are NPAs, everybody hates censorship. Nobody likes this, especially except for this very, very tiny group on one side. We need to use those words. We need to not be afraid to use those words when they apply. So turn their own tool against them. With that, my last slide, I believe, is just my email and website and Facebook address. And I understand that questions will be at the end. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight.
Jennifer, thank you so much. And thank you for covering so much daunting but necessary ground so quickly. And I should have mentioned this earlier. All three of our speakers have created a one-page that we're putting in the chat on their topic with either some of these bullet points that you could make in a letter to the editor or a call to whichever official you're grabbing by the throat. And again, individual actions and links to things to do. In addition, remember this entire presentation, if you've been madly taking notes, as I do, because it helps me remember, this whole presentation will be up on our YouTube channel, and you can work your way through these slides and get more information off of them as you want to. Third speaker, Ginger Mundy. Thank you so much for being with us. Ginger is coming to us from all the way in Orange County. She's been a member of the League Women Voters there since 2018, served on their board for 2 years, and is currently chair of their Women's Rights Committee. She's also been co-chair of Reproductive Health and Justice Action Team for 2 years. Doubtless a difficult task here in Florida. She's a small business co-owner, but transitioning, I'm happy to say, into full-time work in the social justice arena and pursuing a master's in public interest communication at the University of Florida. We are happy to have her at work in the state and happy to have her here tonight. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thanks also to Katie and Jennifer for the great presentations. I just want to say before I get to reproductive rights that I listened to the school choice committee meeting. That was horrible. And I also listened to the permitless carry one, watched the whole thing. So if y'all ever want to go to the floridachannel.org, you got some free time. It's frustrating, but you can see the advocates that are standing up and testifying against these horrible bills, and also once in a while in support. But sadly, most of what comes through seems not to. Anyway, I digress. So as Elizabeth said, I'm with League of Women Voters, and I am the co-chair of the Reproductive Health and Action Team. Our priorities usually think of the League, right, as voting, but we do, especially, in the past few decades, but really recently in Florida, have really and as our rights came under attack, moved more into the reproductive health and justice space. We are a member of Floridians for Reproductive Freedom, which is a coalition of a wide variety of groups, including Equality Florida, Progress Florida, Planned Parenthood, ACLU Florida. So we stay on top of this all year round. And it's a very active group and has gotten even more active. Our top priorities this year are to advocate against any proposed additional restrictions on abortion. As you likely know, the 15-week ban was passed last year. I'll talk about that in just a minute. We want to advocate against any form of contraception restrictions. This has not been proposed in Florida, but we know it is being talked about in other states, and there are no vacuums. This legislation is being put together on a much larger scale. So we're also advocating for legislation, against this actually priority went away, but I'll talk about the student athlete's menstrual cycle here coming up. It's all of that information is going to be on my one pager, and we would support, of course, any legislation that would support pregnant people and support maternity, better maternal outcomes, because that is a problem here in the state of Florida. So, as I mentioned, House Bill, we're in the same situation as everybody else. Things aren't good. But last year, House Bill 5 passed the legislature and was signed into law by Governor DeSantis. There have been lawsuits brought against that. They are still winding their way through the courts. One has, the Florida Supreme Court has agreed to hear the lawsuit that was brought by the ACLU. That is on behalf of Planned Parenthood and on some independent clinics and an individual, I believe. However, that is not going to happen before session is over. The briefs, they announced earlier in January, the briefs are due at the end of April, and session begins March 7th and ends May 5th. So it will be May or later before they actually hear the case. So given that 3 of the justices were appointed by DeSantis, we're not holding our breath, but this lawsuit is based on the privacy clause that exists in our Florida Constitution. That is not in the U.S. Constitution. So Roe was on a different standing, but we have it specified, and there is precedent in Florida that privacy clause supports a right to abortion. So we'll see what happens, but that's the status of that. There were 2 other lawsuits that were filed on religious purposes. Those have not gone anywhere that I'm understanding. I think the one from a synagogue down in South Florida may have been withdrawn. There's another one that's kind of a group of various faiths that have filed, and I was not able to find an update, and we haven't talked about it on FRF. So I don't think that that's moving. So for this year, for session this year, no legislation has been filed to date. We are expecting a ban to be filed. We're expecting it could range. There's a range. The Senate President Pasadomo has floated 12 weeks with exceptions for rape and incest. There are people who want 6 weeks. And DeSantis has said if the legislature passed, I think he said it in the past week and a half, if the legislature passed a 6-week ban, that he will sign it. So, but I imagine he'll have a lot of sway whether they pass that or not. But so it could be anywhere in that range of 6 to 12. And we also expect the strategy they'll use is to ram it through even faster than school choice and the permitless carry, simply because they don't want to give activists the time to mobilize and advocates. So they want to move that through. But outside of that, and not having a crystal ball, it's a wait and see. So if this is something, y'all, Jacksonville, you're not terribly far from Tallahassee. If this is something that you're willing to mobilize around, on the one pager, there are groups you can follow. And I would also recommend specifically getting in on the Floridians for Reproductive Freedom and the Progress Florida newsletters, because they talk, that's going to give you a lot of information. And also, if you're interested in mobilization, let me know. My email's not on that one pager, but I'm sure Elizabeth can send it out, and just let me know. And I know we need to have questions, and I'm looking at the clock, so I'm gonna run through the rest of this. Female student athletes and the FHSAA board. Well, I have a whole thing on there that they're meeting in February 26th and the 27th in Gainesville, which is still happening. However, they changed the form today. I think they got so much resistance. They were, just for those of you who may not heard about it real quick, they were asking have you started your period? If so, when? How often is your period? When was your last cycle? So the doctor wasn't asking that to just sign off on a form. The FHSAA was asking it for a female athlete. So there has been a lot of mobilization around that, calling petitions and all of that. As of today, it has changed. All that is removed. And the post form now says gender identity at birth. So they're making it extremely clear that it's all aimed at trans girls. So that is where we are. And that's something that will be, again, the meeting's February 26th and 27th. If you sign up for either of those newsletters, or even Equality Florida as well, you'll get updates about that. So it just shows you at least, you know, there was something done, but it almost is, I won't say it's worse, but, and there are some links about sending letters, but anyway, so that is the things that are going on right now. We'll be monitoring and updating. You know, what can I say? I think one of the biggest things is they have super majorities. It's to get out the vote next year. As a league member, I can highly support that. Join your league. 2024 is crucial for our state and our country. And if we can, I know gerrymandering and all of that, but if we can make any changes, that's going to, in this state, it's going to be hard to do it, but we have to speak out, as the two previous speakers said, regardless. They need to know it can't go unopposed, all of these laws that they're trying to force through. Stay informed. Everything is what everybody said before. I will say y'all do have an abortion clinic there in Jacksonville. If you're so inclined, consider being volunteering as an escort, donating to them, or abortion funds. There are abortion funds in Florida, and I can get y'all that information as well. But and coincidentally, with Mom's Demand, we're going to be League of Women Voters of Florida will be lobbying. Our lobby days are March 8th and 9th. So we'll be in Tallahassee as well. And, you know, I think if you can go with an organization to go to Tallahassee, it's a great experience, and it really gives you some insight. It's frustrating too, but anyway, questions, sorry. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for coming. And I don't think we could have found three speakers that would more dramatically make the point that elections matter. We all knew it would be a discouraging session, but this is putting some real meat on those bones. Before I go to questions others have submitted, to both Jennifer and Katie made it fairly clear neither Florida nor national law is all that helpful to us in opposing permitless carry in the way of legal challenges. At least I think that's what I heard, but tell me if I'm wrong. But for Ginger and Jenn, I'm curious, is there any hope in the structure of national law that can help with legal challenges over time? That obviously won't help immediately pregnant women or children in our schools right this year, but are there ways to ultimately unravel some of this because of national protections?
I'll go first, since I'm unmuted. So, and there is one thing I want to bring up real quick about legal action on a national scale, and that's medication abortion. But our best chance was last year, I believe, and Manchin and Sinema refused to get rid of the filibuster. So I think those protection, and next year's not a good year for Democrats, given what seats are up and where they are. So I feel that legislation is unlikely, and the Supreme Court is not on our side. So I feel like legal challenges are going to be difficult. I think to get our rights back and even go beyond. So there is better access for all people and not one clinic in a state. That it's going to take a generation, I'm afraid. I mean, I think it's going to, and there has been, just real quick, a medication of the mifepristol. There's been a lawsuit filed in Texas, but this has national consequences. It's against the FDA and saying they should have never approved that. That is used in medical abortions. And if they judge shopped and they got a judge who is very, very anti-abortion, anti-contraception, I think. I mean, so that is going to be moving through the courts and we'll see what happens. But hopefully, as long as, we have Biden in the office and the FDA will, and the administration, the DOJ will fight back on that. So, an appeal.
Jenn, is there any hope on the education front, again, in terms of national standards that Florida could be held to, or is it also state-based? There's nothing.
It's a good question. I think a lot of it's really state-based. And unfortunately, I think Florida is positioning themselves to try to keep a really outsized influence on even national educational fronts. And so the fight for AP African American history recently, I think exemplifies that. I came from Texas. Texas maintained an outsized influence on national education because they purchased so many textbooks that their standards in Texas ended up influencing, other states' books that were available as well. So I say that to give precedent to, DeSantis made a big deal about we were not going to have AP African American history in Florida because there was a module on queer theory. There was other things that he objected to. The College Board then published the final curriculum and it was significantly different. The College Board president went on NPR and repeatedly said, this had nothing to do with Florida. This was in place many months before. How dare anybody suggest that that Florida had anything to do with this? Unfortunately, then right-wing media today actually leaked emails purportedly from the state to the College Board for months, appearing to have influenced this process. So I am worried there may not be enough federal intervention in enough time. There could be specific charges and complaints that could be made, particularly how LGBTQ plus students are treated and their protections. There were a number of comments at school board meetings recently about bathrooms, for example. I think we're going to have another series of bathroom fights around trans and non-binary students and where they are able to go to the bathroom. And a lot of that protective language that would have protected students and being able to seek a safe bathroom was removed from the LGBTQ plus support guide in Duval County in 2022. But there are some federal protections that might be able to be drawn into place. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be more of a having to call the federal Department of Ed and file suits and file complaints. The last thing I would say is I don't think we've really seen a lot of lawsuits on the book ban issue. This is still very live. And a lot of the suits that were filed last year on HB 1557 around LGBTQ plus students were filed at the state and they lost. And the judges basically said, well, the state isn't actually banning, anything other than, they're not banning rainbow stickers. They're banning content in K through 3. If anything's happening beyond that, it's happening at your district. So I know the district is feeling very squeezed by these right-wing opposition. However, I do worry that we need to be prepared, I guess, for if there's a student who's harmed or a staff member who's harmed by one of these bills, and I hate that they would be harmed, but we would need to be ready to help them file suits. I know Equality Florida has filed some of the state suits, and they're in partnership with our coalition. Jasmine is in our coalition. So I do think we need to keep that in mind, that we may have to pull other levers in addition to everything else that we've discussed, and filing suits at either the state or local level, depending on what the harm was. Whether it goes anywhere or not, I don't know. But that may be something we have to consider.
I have one more question. I am not seeing other questions tied to our three speakers. If anyone has them, put them in the chat now, but in the meantime, I have one to ask that is irresistible. The three of you are doing amazing work in an amazingly discouraging setting. And I'm just interested to know, since all the rest of us are doing our own versions of banging our heads against the wall, how it is that you're finding the energy and the hope to keep doing it. What is inspiring you to stay in this fight? We're very glad about it, but what have you got to say?
I would say it's the righteous fight. Even though we are banging our heads against the wall, we have to be in this. And it's kids. When you're attacking children, it's not okay. And a lot of the things that we're seeing passed are direct attacks on children. And I've got 2 young kids. And when it comes to gun violence, like, this isn't normal. And I refuse to sit down and say there's nothing we can do about this. We have to keep fighting. So that's my personal fight. And find your people. Like, Jen and I are on a group text, we text all day. So you have to find your people to, like, laugh through, like, when you want to cry, and then also motivate each other and lean on each other when things get really bad. So find your people. And I'm really thankful for the people on this Zoom right now.
I echo everything she said about finding the people. And I want to add, when you do get a win, you have to celebrate the crap out of it. So when the sex ed curriculum passed the school board in December, it passed 5-2, which was actually much better than I thought it was going to be. And that was an enormous win. Now, we took a breath, and we're going to have to go do that same thing again in April and May. We're going to have to go back to DCPS and beg them to have sex ed. And I'm going to have people in there screaming that we're showing kids porn in kindergarten. But we were able to celebrate that win and take that pause and say, okay, we won one. Same thing as a physician, buprenorphine support for folks with opioid use disorders is near and dear to my heart. And we got the X waiver removed. Just trust me that this is a very good thing for getting more people off of fentanyl and heroin and onto medication treatment that can make them better. So that was such a huge win. Still trying to ride that high a little bit so that I don't beat my head against the wall in the onslaught of, sometimes overwhelming stuff coming my way.
I think what Katie and Jen said are both 100% great. Beer and wine is helpful for me. So and it is, it is a network. Although I will say, and this is not specifically how I do it, because I will say I don't always do it. I frequently don't deal with it well. But I think one thing for all of us that are in progressive movements that I saw last year, because when Dobbs passed, it was very, or when that decision came down, and even when the leak came out, everyone was very afraid, right? You knew it was coming, but it was a gut punch regardless. So it was, and that was right after, that happened at the beginning of May. And then there was the shooting in Buffalo and the Uvalde shooting. That month was just, I was at the end of my rope. And I think as we work together, it is Loretta Ross, who was a co-founder of Sister Song, talks about calling people in rather than calling them out. And I think that is really important. It's easy to to lash out to somebody if they hurt your feelings, say something that's disrespectful, don't use your pronouns, whatever, and I think never has it been more important for us to band together and, recognize that people are, make mistakes and are don't understand things and are faulty. And, it's better to have a conversation with them than to react especially in a group of people when you're trying to come together to affect some change. So, that's one thing I think that it's important to keep in mind as we're trying to do this work.
Thank you all. It's been really helpful and weirdly inspiring to hear from all of you. And we will share all this material both with the group here tonight and also off of our website. I'm mindful of the fact that you all made time out of crowded schedules, and I told you that we would keep you an hour. So those of you who've been our speakers, I would like us all to give you the round of applause you deserve and let you go if you want. I have a few more things for BAM business, if the rest of you will stay with me. But first, thank you all very, very much for being here.
Thank you all so much.
Yes.
And you don't
thank
have to
you.
leave, but you can.
Appreciate the interest. I'm going to take off, and please share my email with everybody, Elizabeth. Thank you
I
for
did.
the invitation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. I've got to go put kids to bed.
I thought
Thanks
so.
and good night.
Okay, thanks again. For everyone else, I did see one question in the chat from Judy Papel saying, what's BAM doing about the mayor's race? And what I have for you all now is several coming events you should know about. Our partners at Mandarin Indivisible are having a candidate forum next Wednesday that will feature the people they think their members should vote for. They've simplified it greatly. And so you can see the candidates that'll be there. That is going to be a Zoom, and the sign up link is in our box, is in our chat box. In addition to that, Beaches Watch is holding a mayor's forum. The League of Women Voters is holding this mayoral candidate meet and greet. And at this point, we decided we were better off focusing on getting people out to vote than holding yet another mayor's forum, particularly given that at this point, it's actually very hard to schedule. We'll be getting you information on a weekly basis about how you can text and canvass and find yard signs and all of that. The third event here that you should know about, this Why Phenomenal Women Vote, BAM and NOW and Northside Coalition and DWIN, it's a big combined effort to try to promote women voting in this upcoming election here in Jacksonville. And we'll be getting you more information about that as well. But I've posted links to all these events, if you're finding it hard to read on this one slide, in the chat, so you can find out more about that. And there is one more thing those of you who live in Atlantic Beach should know about, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Nancy Stotts for the update on that.
Yes, very quickly. I know it's late, but to all my AB neighbors, please, this is a plea. It's very, very important. Whether you've been following or not, I'll briefly catch you up. Our new mayor, Mayor Ford, has put together a charter review commission in a very strange way that was a basically majority vote. And then if anyone didn't get 3 votes, they were eliminated from the list. And he had a very large list and he whittled it down. And so we have 13 members, but 2 of our commissioners, one had 0 of their appointees on it, and the other one had 1. And much to our kind of amazement, Mitchell Reeves was elected onto this committee, but Brittany Norris was not, even though there was no one representing that district and no person of color. So we are requesting respectfully a reconsideration of that process because it was not made transparent and it was the look wasn't good. People were not sure what the heck was going on, to be honest. So my ask is one of 2 things. Ideally, if you could come on Monday, February 13th, it's at the City Commission building there at 6:30. You need to get there fairly early to put in a speaker card, and all you need to say is, Let's quash this vote and do it again by having each commissioner appoint 3 people, period. So there's equal representation. If you can't make it on Monday at 6:30, please email them. You go to coab.us. You can email all of them at once, all 5 with one click, and just a very brief note that says, please reconsider the vote for the CRC, that's the Charter Review Commission, because these folks can put in changes to our city charter, and we should all be very concerned. And if you need more information, reach out to me, but I appreciate your time.
And thank you very much. If anyone else has anything they want to add, put your hand up or throw something into the chat. I appreciate all the attention that everyone's given to a discouraging but really necessary program. And thank you for being here. If not,
Thank you,
I'm
Elizabeth.
going to tell you all good night.
Great program. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everyone.